Alright guys, we're back. 28 minutes in, part 3. Let's do this. Where were we? They're hiding more land, right? That's the last thing I remember. Let's hear, what do you got, Mustache Man?
Testimony, the verdict would come back guilty. It would come back guilty.
Let's go back real quick.
Observe all of this evidence, this eyewitness testimony. The verdict would come back guilty. It would come back guilty.
Did you know that eyewitness testimony is considered extremely unreliable and not very good evidence in court? Just FYI.
Okay. You are moving 1,000 miles an hour as Earth rotates. You are moving 18 miles per second in orbit around the sun, and you don't feel any of that. Okay?
Okay.
You don't feel any of that. If it's trying to fling you off the Earth,
Okay.
but the force of gravity is resisting back, by what force is it trying to fling you off? That upward centrifugal force subtracts from the gravitational force that the Earth is trying to put on you. It subtracts.
Okay.
So Chuck, what do you weigh here and now?
192 pounds. Yeah.
I'll give you the 190 pounds, okay?
Okay.
So if you do that,
I'm just going to break this up for copyright purposes here, because I don't know what this is from. That the dude that Neil is talking to looks a little dumbfounded. I have no idea who he is, but yeah, it looks like this is a little much for him.
the math, you run to Ecuador, because we're in the Western Hemisphere, so let's stay there. You run to Ecuador, you will not be 190 pounds. You'll be like 185 pounds.
What?
That's how significant it is.
That's
If I did my math correct, and I think I did, there are pounds less that you weigh for living on the equator than for living anywhere else, simply because the spinning Earth is trying to fling you off.
nice.
Yes. Yes.
If the Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour in a curved trajectory, we're dropping at a rate of miles per minute, but somehow none of that inertia affects these rocks here, which are perfectly balanced.
It's important to note that all of that movement, all of the movement that the Earth does, is through nothing. Relatively nothing. So of course you don't feel it. This is a prat. This has been done.
The fact is, the Earth is stationary, and that is scientific, not pseudoscience. In 1879, George Airy, astronomer royal for 49 years, who did a telescope experiment and proved that the Earth was stationary. Then we have
Parallax, also known as Robotham, who carried
Oh, thank you for bringing back part 1, where I pointed out that everything you believe is taken from Robotham. Airy's failure, by the way, no, not at all. Just like Michelson-Morley, both of those experiments rely on the fact that the Earth moves to even be performed. They don't work without the Earth moving. Robotham. Oh boy.
out an experiment in the late 1800s on the Bedford Levels experiment, where he went at a distance of 6 miles, which should have showed up some sort of curvature of around 16 foot. No curvature was seen at all.
Then we have Michelson.
Oh, fuck off. I'm not overly familiar with Bedford Level, I'll admit. I'll have to do some research and throw in editing DKIS for that. Yeah, it's pretty simple, really. The Bedford Level experiment was performed by Robotham himself. It was a simple line-of-sight test to see something from a long way away, further than you should be able to see due to the curvature of the Earth, and he concluded that he couldn't see the curvature and that the Earth was flat. However, in 1870, after adjusting Robotham's method to avoid the effects of atmospheric refraction, Alfred Russel Wallace found a curvature consistent with a spherical Earth. It's basically every modern flat earther's line-of-sight experiment compared to the debunker doing it properly. But here comes Michelson-Morley, or Michelson-Morley. I think it's Michelson.
Michelson.
There's no A.
Michelson.
So I'm pretty sure it's Michelson, but...
Michelson.
Here it comes. if they can't, I'm gonna fucking quote the experiment back at them. Let me just get that queued up. I'll assume they can't. I think that's a pretty safe assumption. Jesus.
Morley and Sagnac in the early 1900s with their interferometers using light instead of telescopes this time. And with their interferometer experiments, they proved that the ether over the Earth, the field, is moving and the Earth is stationary.
Exactly the opposite. They proved that the ether doesn't exist and already knew that the Earth was moving. Here is the exact conclusion from Albert Michelson himself.
Michelson.
The experiments on the relative motion of the Earth and ether have been completed, and the result decidedly negative. The expected deviation on the interference fringes from the zero should have been 0.40 of a fringe. The maximum displacement was 0.02, and the average much less than 0.01, and then not in the right place. As displacement is proportional to squares of the relative velocities, it follows that if the ether does slip past, the relative velocity is less than 1/6 of the Earth's velocity. So, what that says, see, they think because it says the results, the experiments on the motion of the Earth and ether have been completed, and the result negative, they ignore that it's the relative motion of the Earth and ether. It was trying to prove whether or not there was an ether drag. What Michelson-Morley was about, it occurred in a period of time where we understood that sound needs to travel through a medium and can't travel without a medium, right? And we assumed that light was the same way. So we assumed that somewhere up above the Earth's atmosphere, there must be some sort of medium. This was dubbed the ether. And attempts to prove the ether's existence were performed by a number of people, and none of them could do it, and they eventually concluded that there was no ether, and that light didn't need a medium to travel through. And then this was eventually proven when we went to space and discovered that there was nothing above the atmosphere.
We also had Michelson-Gale. They did an experiment in the 1930s and proved that the Earth is stationary.
Nope.
One of the greatest science experiments of all time, in my opinion, is from Marconi. Marconi, in 1901, set up transmitters to send radio waves, like signals, wireless signals across the ocean, Atlantic Ocean, okay? So he has one set up in Europe and one set up in Canada, okay? And they're sending signals. I think the letter S was the first one. Boom. And it worked. Almost 2,000 miles across the ocean, they got this signal. There's no curvature. You're talking about 600 miles of curvature between the 2 points. But it worked. Because all water's level.
Hold up. So I'm vaguely familiar with this. Here we go. Oh, that's what I thought. That is what I suspected, because that's how a lot of long-distance ground-based transmissions are received. Marconi's long-distance transmission was achieved by bouncing the signal off of the ionosphere. So it went up and down. No need to account for the curve when you're going above it.
I don't even know if he was trying to talk about that at the time. It was just more about his technology that he was coming out with. And have you learned about that in school? No.
Because he didn't talk about that. Marconi believed that the transmission would follow the curvature of the Earth, and nobody else believed him. And when it did, as far as he thought, everyone was really shocked, and then investigation into it later revealed that the signal had bounced off the ionosphere. So it was a slight mystery for, like, I don't know, a few months, maybe a few years, but it's not a mystery anymore. And that's why you're not taught about it, because there's nothing mysterious about it.
We have Pierluigi Gina, a colleague of Marconi, and before he died, he showed people in his laboratory how the Earth is stationary. You can go to my channel, Mr. Astrotheology, and you can see videos of Mr. Pierluigi Igina proving in his laboratory with strobe lights how you can prove quite easily that the Earth is stationary.
Every scientific experiment through
With strobe lights. Since they're not going to expand on that one, I'm not going to debunk it here. Maybe Editing Deakus will, or I'll say fuck you, Santos, for trying to send me to your channel. Pierluigi Igina is a quack. His findings are not recognized by the scientific community because they're electromagnetism pseudoscience nonsense. He believes in a magnetic atom. It's ridiculous. Also, fuck you, Santos, for trying to send me to your channel.
throughout time, looking for axial rotation or curvature has proven the opposite. They don't teach this in schools. Any observation, when you go outside on a calm morning, you can see a perfectly glass lake. And your
But I can't see the shore for some reason.
senses will tell you that, nothing is moving.
We, stationary earthers, we have science, real science, on our side, and the Globies have pseudoscience.
We have real science. Can you close your eyes and kind of look up a little bit and be like the stereotypical condescending Californian while you do that, Santos? Yeah, fuck you.
In fact, all they have is Einstein saying, I have come to believe that no optical experiment can prove that the Earth is moving. And yet, the Earth is moving.
Science!
Hang on. While I was thinking of this problem in my student years, I came to know the strange result of Michelson's experiment. Soon I came to the conclusion that our idea about the motion of the Earth with respect to the ether is incorrect if we admit Michelson's null results as a fact. This was the first path which led me to the special theory of relativity. Since then, I have come to believe that the motion of the Earth cannot be detected through any optical experiment, though the Earth is revolving around the Sun. Yeah. So you don't get it, and that's your problem. I don't see the issue with this. I don't know that the motion of the Earth can be detected through any optical experiment. Ring laser gyroscopes are optical, but rely on not just that. I don't know. I mean, Einstein existed in the 40s. He might have been wrong. Have you considered that? Because that's something else flat earthers don't consider. Just because a scientist was famous and well-known and discovered something revolutionary does not mean they were never wrong. That's absolutely not true. A great example, in fact, would be Pythagoras is a great example. Pythagoras, world-famous mathematician, died because he was being pursued by people who wanted to kill him, and he came across a bean field, and he believed that beans were of supreme importance and should never harm them in any way. So he didn't want to run through the bean field and destroy them. So he stopped running and let his pursuers catch up to him. I'm going to say that was wrong of Pythagoras. It's just me.
No optical...
Einstein. I always recommend people go watch Albert Einstein in his interviews. He's reading cue cards. He's reading notes that someone handed him.
He's reading things that were probably translated beforehand because he was German and English was not his first language. That seems like super obvious to me.
Kind of like people on TV nowadays.
There is no optical experiment ever been conducted.
Oh, right. Right. There has never been an incident of someone on TV recently who needed to use cues to help them because English wasn't their first language. There's no example of that at all.
Yes.
Jennifer,
Hi.
How do you feel for how do you see yourself for the Oscars?
You can't live your whole life behind your phone, bro.
Huh?
You're just not gonna. We can't do that. You gotta live in the now.
Sorry.
You know?
Prove that the Earth is moving.
The Earth is spinning at 1,040 miles an hour. You can't feel it.
You can't measure it. You can't observe it. You
can
can't
measure
repeat
it.
it. But trust us, there's not one experiment that shows the Earth is spinning.
Wrong.
Or moving whatsoever.
There's plenty. There is plenty. You've got Foucault pendulums. You've got you've got examination of the stars. Star trails. The rotation of the stars around one fixed point in the sky, or two fixed points in the sky, depending on which hemisphere you're in, clearly indicates a sphere. There are plenty of experiments, and can I just say, I fucking hate this animation. This animation is terrible, because it might even be relatively accurate if you were to speed things up, but that's the problem, is it only works if you speed things up. Otherwise, all of that should look relatively still if you're looking at it in real time. So I hate that animation. It's very misleading.
There is, however, an experiment that was proven in Behind the Curve.
Bob Nodell was talking about the ring laser gyro, showing that there is a apparent 15 degrees drift throughout most of the day.
Is when we
How did I forget about that one?
turned on that gyroscope, we found that we were picking up a drift, a 15 degree per hour drift.
And
No.
this was taken out of context. It was later, the experiment was done at a higher altitude, and it showed a different rotation speed, which absolutely proves it's not the Earth that's moving, that it's the ether that is spinning above us.
Netflix is
No evidence of that, so I'm just gonna say you're lying.
mainstream. Netflix is the alternative mainstream narrative.
I don't give a shit about Netflix. This is ad hominem. Don't attack the source, attack the claim. I don't give a fuck about Netflix. Attack what is actually in the footage.
Netflix can't go against the grain. They'll lose their contract.
A documentary, like a mockumentary. I'm sure someone watched our movie and was like, whoever made this movie is a government shill, and they're just trying to hide it. Netflix is in on it, trying to hide it.
Yeah,
he accidentally proves that the Earth is round.
It was the biggest mic drop. It was the biggest mic drop. And I love that.
If you put a clown emoji over him, what he's saying is stupid.
You kind of cut it.
The thing is, we have technology that is outrunning their lies. Now we have time lapse. Ooh, imagine that. We have time lapse where we can point at the sky, and year after year, day after day, hour after hour, the sky's spinning.
Around 2 fixed points in the sky.
Every day there should be different stars, random stars, in the sky if we are traveling at 650 million miles an hour, which...
No, because the stars are traveling with us. I don't think flat earthers are even aware. We're all moving within the galaxy, right? And to the naked eye, generally, even when you're in a dark sky viewing area, you can view a very tiny percentage of the stars in our galaxy. You can't see that many of them. And they're all moving with us. So why would anything change?
Which is Mach 870,000. Do you really believe that every year we move through space at 5.5 trillion miles every year?
He had it looked up on Google. He had it looked up on Google beforehand. Oh, that's so cute. I don't need to believe it, Santos. I don't need to.
And yet every year the same stars keep turning over our Earth. Aries,
With
Taurus,
us.
Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo.
They move with us. And it's also worth mentioning that they do change over time. There's this wonderful thing called precession that happens. What was it, about 1,500 years ago or so, our North Star was Thuban. Now it's Polaris. In another 3,000 years, it'll be Vega. They move.
Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, year after year after year, and yet none of those constellations distort, change shape, get brighter. There has never been in recorded...
Get brighter? The luminosity of stars changes all the time. That is a bold-faced lie. The best example is Betelgeuse, because everyone's watching it waiting for it to explode. But yeah, one of the ways we know exoplanets exist is because of a shift in the luminosity of stars, because we can tell something is passing in front of it, something is orbiting around it, like a planet. So that is a bold-faced lie.
History, we have never seen any star get brighter or dimmer.
There are so many worldwide corroborated accounts of supernovas happening in world history. Everything Santos is saying right now is a lie.
Or any shape of those constellations which are still recognizable today as they were thousands of years ago, they never suffer any parallax or distortion.
They actually do. They actually do. They suffer arc seconds of distortion, which is, you know, not really visible to the naked eye, but it exists.
Polaris has never moved in all of recorded history.
I've already disproven that.
Point your camera up at Polaris and do a time lapse and watch God's perfect timepiece spin above you.
And we move 5,694,000,000 miles through space every year. Congratulations to you if you believe that. It's called education, indoctrination, and dumbing down.
Okay, and I don't care. It's argument from incredulity.
We're bound that this theater will soon bring you the greatest array of pictures ever to reach our screen.
If you look back in history, you got Universal, their company. They started off with a logo with a globe in it, but it wasn't until like the 1920s that they actually had the motion one where it was a spinning globe. And they actually had an airplane in the early ones, like leaving a chemtrail that said Universal, which is kind of funny. Nobody has been high enough to even see what it looked like. They were definitely trying to instill the image of a globe in people's heads, because obviously early on in the movie industry, they were...
Just gonna pull up, hang on, I'm gonna pull up something I posted on Twitter today. So Universal used a globe before anyone had been up there to see it. Here's a globe from 1490. What's your point?
One of the most popular companies to make movies, so people were going to the theater and seeing this globe.
So they're showing you a globe before every single movie to program your mind. They were showing this globe before they even went up there to see what it was. I think the first...
I don't know if you know this, but the Universal isn't universal. Like, for instance, if you grew up in India, you weren't indoctrinated with the Universal logo. You were indoctrinated with Bollywood film logos. Same with China. Lots of places in the world don't... Universal is not as big an influence as it is in the West. So that's just silly. I think they're about to mention August Picard, and that'll be fun. I might have to pre-look that up, because I know about it.
Man ever to go up and check. This Picard going up there. I mean, that's a story we're not taught in school.
From the practical point of view, Professor Picard's experiment is of the highest possible importance.
These timelines, these dates, these are facts.
You know, I just noticed something. They spent a large portion of this documentary trying to establish that history can be rewritten and that everything in the history books is subject. But this thing in this history book is totally accurate. This is a fact, says Hibbler. Isn't that interesting?
We got Auguste Piccard coming out in the 1930s in an actual publication by a science journal.
No, you don't. Yeah, so the claim is that that Auguste Piccard said this. It seemed a flat disc with an upturned edge. He didn't actually say that. Hang on. I need to get the actual article. The story of their adventure, yada yada yada. It's described that way in the article. The article is not quoting him. That's where the flat disc with the upturned edge came from. That's not how Piccard described it. Not to mention at the altitude he was at, which I can't remember. It'll be up here, over there. There we go. That's how mirrors work. The altitude he was at, the curvature would still be barely visible, the way it is on an airplane.
Saying that the Earth looks like a flat disc with an upturned edge.
Besides Universal programming you had Walt Disney programming you with space documentaries for almost 15 years straight.
Some pretty crazy propaganda in the 1950s. There was one called Man in Space. He's talking about taking men to the moon in a rocket. And then if we cruise on, we got Richard.
It's called science fiction.
Bird, he goes on Longines chronoscope and he's sitting down and he's telling people.
Strangely enough, there's left in the world today an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being.
Shortly after Richard E. Byrd did that interview, they put the Antarctic Treaty in place, and then 1 year later, NASA is established.
Almost 0 hour.
What the fuck? Okay. First of all, you guys need to learn that stock sound effects exist. Like, you can get a stock sound of a monkey for free instead of doing whatever the fuck that was into the microphone. So, yeah, it's pretty clear what land he was referring to. He was referring to Antarctica, as it is still, to this day, probably humanity's least explored continent. We do what we can, but it's rough out there. It's not good. Yeah, then NASA begins. Carry on.
Cape Canaveral and enlarged 16mm pictures show a monkey specially trained and conditioned for voyaging in space. 2 monkeys had been selected for the job. They called them Abel and Baker, A and B, of course. In fact, the monkeys came down safely near Antigua. Reported none the worse, after blazing the trail for human space travel.
Yep. They come in and they're the gatekeepers for your mind. Like, they're making sure that people think that they live on a spinning ball, and that's their sole purpose. That it has always been their sole purpose.
Except we've already established Earth was known to be a ball for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, prior to NASA's establishment. So that's really irrelevant. And it, again, ignores what the N in NASA stands for. National. They are the American Space Agency. America represents 4% of the Earth's population. So who were the rest of humanity being programmed by? That's my question. Because there are 64 other space agencies that you guys refuse to acknowledge. That's called a camera artifact. You'd see that if you ever watched a Skype call on a bad connection. As a matter of fact, you should see this exact phenomenon in this video. Sometimes when I pause and play it again, the bitrate hiccups for a second, and you get a few artifacts on the screen. I'll cut back to when that's happened, because I've seen it happen here.
Throughout time, looking for axial rotation.
So that'll be funny to show exactly what they're showing in my video. Yeah, he missed. They were trying for a thing and he missed. What's your point?
That is the magic of engineering.
That's a classic clip. That one was edited for TV. That's not NASA's footage. There was a fade out to show that it was to continue on the shot that they were doing. It had nothing to do with NASA's actual footage. If you want to pull that card, I mean, you've got that one video. It has the worst title. One of the most detailed ISS tours. That's how that works. But it's 50 minutes with 2 cuts in it, I think. And the middle portion is like 45 minutes long with 0 camera edits. I would love to know how they pulled that off.
I would wear a mask on my face in a nanosecond.
Oh, look, there it was.
Unfortunately, we lost the technology.
It can take days, even weeks, to produce just a single image. The dazzling final results, enough to keep us all dreaming.
NASA?
You're not even gonna try? You're just gonna show the clips and go, look, it's all fake. See? Done. Really? Come on, that's super lazy. However, I think we've reached a good stopping point here. What are we at? 41 minutes. Whew. We're getting through it, boys. We're getting through it. It's getting better, because especially I think the next part will be good too, because it's going to be more about NASA. We've just started to get into that. But it's getting funner. Did not start off well though, and considering they make these things because they want to bring people over to their side, people are going to get bored in the first 10 minutes and switch it off, because nobody cares when people cry about the repression narrative. Oh, we've been censored, we're not allowed to speak our truth. Nobody cares, because you know who else says that? Minor attracted persons. Do you know what they are? So with that, I think I'm going to call it a day. Thank you everyone very much for joining me, and we will be back soon with more Next Level of Stupid. If you enjoy this content, consider hitting the subscribe button. If you really enjoy this content, consider donating on Patreon, becoming a member, buying some of my books on Amazon, or buying some of my merch. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you over the curve, Space Cowboys.